are murdering us for your profit and convenience.
I'm not going to permit the proceedings to be interrupted in this way. If you ladies would
Our lives have been interrupted by taking this pill.
Not only were we not told of the dangers of the pill, when we came in with problems, when we came in with side effects, we were told to go on using the pill.
One doctor, I believe, said, fertilizer is to wheat what estrogen is to cancer.
In order to properly tell the story of birth control, it's important to understand the context behind the two hormones associated with contraception, estrogen and progesterone. It's quite common nowadays to hear that estrogen is the female hormone, and I'm here to tell you that moniker is incredibly misleading, considering it is not exclusive to females, nor a hormone, nor the.
What?
Estrogens are actually a class of molecules which share some key properties. Historically, estrogens were not considered to be female hormones, though their role in sexuality and reproduction was understood. Estrogens were being studied as early as we had methods to detect them, showing proliferative effects in the early 1900s. During this time, the value of using animal tissue to correct deficiencies in humans was showing tremendous promise. Insulin and thyroid hormones derived from dog and porcine tissue could cure diabetes and hypothyroidism. Using animal sexual organs to boost vitality had also been studied, with a man in the late 1880s claiming to be rejuvenated with an injection of guinea pig and dog testicle extracts. Naturally, doing the same for the ovaries was next. Researchers did figure out how to isolate estrogen and progesterone from animal tissue, but there were some major issues with this approach. Obtaining the hormones from natural sources was difficult and time-consuming. With their processes, it took 1 ton of animal organs just to obtain 1 gram of progesterone. Not exactly an ideal product manufacturing pipeline. In the coming decades, the pursuit to create synthetic analogs of these hormones was driven by the pharmaceutical industry's idea that they would have many beneficial effects for women, restoring their youth and fertility, and of course contraception, just to name a few. However, various esteemed academics warned about the potential of estrogens to cause cancer and other health issues, heavily cautioning its use at even low doses. It was already shown in the 1930s that the very estrogen that was set to be marketed as a method to prevent miscarriages, known as DES, was capable of inducing miscarriage or abortion in animals even at small doses. In line with other agents that could do this, it was also known to cause a host of other problems in animals as well, including cancer. One key property of estrogen is its ability to increase the cell's propensity for water. This can be seen in classical examples of estrogen dominance, edema or water retention, which manifests as love handles and puffy facial structures. The absorption of more water into cells, or swelling, is a key characteristic of the cellular stress response. It's also a key signal of cellular proliferation. Perhaps estrogen's most well-known function is in the proliferative or follicular phase of the menstrual cycle, where it stimulates the uterine lining and the ovarian follicles to grow in preparation for potential fertilization. Cellular proliferation is also a fundamental characteristic of several diseases, namely cancer. In fact, the branch of cancer medicine, oncology, comes from the Greek word onkos, which means swelling. Dr. Ray Peat, in his book, From PMS to Menopause, Female Hormones in Context, stated that in the 30s and 40s, estrogen was shown to replicate the shock phase of the stress reaction in animals. Peat describes that estrogen's physiological purpose is to stimulate cell division by causing tissues to take up water, mainly for preparing the uterus for pregnancy and the breasts for lactation. Legendary researcher Otto Warburg would win the Nobel Prize in 1931 for his groundbreaking findings on cancer. He stated that the prime cause of cancer is the replacement of the respiration of oxygen in normal body cells by a fermentation of sugar. In other words, anything that could prevent the cell's ability to create energy efficiently was capable of causing cancer. Estrogen's close link to the processes of cancer posit it as perhaps the body's primary brake on energy production. These properties of estrogen are often overlooked as research narrowly tends to focus on the actions of cell receptors. However, it's been shown that cancers that do not contain receptors for estrogen still grow when exposed to estrogen and subside when estrogen is lowered, so the actions of these receptors cannot explain everything. Progesterone is our endogenous anti-estrogen, while estrogen is our primary endogenous anti-progesterone. Progesterone was known to help nourish the early embryo and protect against its demise. After all, that's why it's called progesterone. It's the progestational hormone. However, it was also considered to be nature's contraceptive, signaling that the body is already pregnant. This prevents sperm entry into the uterus as well as ovulation, which is the release of an egg from the ovary where it can be fertilized. The ratio of progesterone to estrogen, rather than their absolute amounts, seems to be the primary determinant of their effect on the organism. Pharmaceutical companies were once a far cry from the conglomerates that control the healthcare system as we see today. During the 30s and 40s, they were small and didn't have much influence with doctors at the time, as they preferred to create their own treatment plans and formulations. That was all about to change, as they saw the opportunity of a lifetime. Previously, it was considered a normal part of life when a woman lost fertility and stopped menstruating. The symptoms of this phase in a woman's life, menopause, was rarely if ever treated because it was not perceived as a problem. However, some genius marketing and a cultural shift was soon to change all of that. Menopause, once seen as a period to allow women to rest, was becoming embarrassing and shameful. It became a medicalized syndrome rather than a natural progression of life. Individually, pharma companies did not possess the resources or manpower to defend their drugs against the concerns of the media, public, and scientists. However, the first estrogen to be used as a drug, DES, was not patented. Due to this, there was no incentive for the companies to compete against one another to sell it. By instead colluding together, these companies were able to successfully lobby the FDA, and in 1941, DES was approved for the therapy of menopause, now under the elegant name of menopausal hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, a landmark moment in history that essentially birthed Big Pharma as we know and hate today. This spawned the marketing campaign to rejuvenate every woman who had gone through menopause with estrogen, creating countless new customers overnight. Women were now told they could restore their youth, increasing their energy for chores, their attractiveness, and their sex drive. This was true to an extent. Estrogen had been recognized to be a powerful stimulant and brain excitant, again characteristic of stress and shock. Dr. Pete famously remarked, "Cocaine doesn't have some of estrogen's side effects." It just so happened that other industries at the time were looking to optimize the rapid advancements in technology and found utility of synthetic compounds over their natural predecessors. By the late 30s, it was established that many of these chemicals possessed properties similar to endogenous estrogen. One of these was the propensity they had to accumulate, both in our tissues and our environment over time. This began the era of environmental endocrine disruptors, or xenoestrogens. DES is now considered to be one of the first endocrine disruptors, and it is strikingly similar to another well-known estrogen, the ubiquitous BPA. Many environmental toxins, from plastics to pesticides, preservatives, organic pollutants, heavy metals, and of course pharmaceuticals, exert many of their harmful properties by being estrogenic. Many of these xenoestrogens are ubiquitous, yet relatively new components to the environment, since they are byproducts of industrial consumer goods manufacturing. Importantly, one analysis from 1996 states, "Several of the known xenoestrogens have a weak estrogenic activity, but are highly persistent and accumulate in fat. Moreover, many of them have an additive effect. This means that the increase in some of the disorders seen today originated 20 to 40 years ago, and the prevalence of such defects in babies born today will not become manifest for another 20 to 40 years or more." These endocrine disruptors are so ubiquitous, you may be exposed to it at this very moment and not even realize it. The popular clothing fiber, polyester, has been demonstrated to be an estrogen mimicking substance, not exactly ideal as a fabric that may be in direct contact with your reproductive tissues. In fact, one study giving 8 bitches polyester pants showed that their progesterone levels plummeted, and these bitches did not get pregnant despite being inseminated. Interestingly, endogenous estrogen production did not seem to be affected, consistent with the action of other exogenous estrogens. How do estrogens cause infertility? While estrogen is important to the pre-pregnancy preparation of the reproductive system, progesterone is the important hormone for maintaining a fertilized egg, or embryo. By essentially overwhelming the system with estrogens, which oppose the effects of progesterone, these early embryos often cease to survive. Plants were another early, well-known source of estrogens, and one of the primary roles of these phytoestrogens seems to be to discourage herbivores from eating them, by impeding their ability to reproduce. For example, it had been recognized by the 1930s that ingestion of clover that contained estrogenic compounds can cause permanent infertility in sheep. In fact, estrogenic excess is such an effective method for reducing fertility and population that humans were taking note. Dr. Pete did his PhD thesis on the interaction between estrogen, aging, menopause, stress, and fertility. He stated, "I found that old animals had too little oxygen in their uterus to keep the embryo alive at the time it would normally be ready to implant itself in the uterus. Giving estrogen to a young animal causes a similar lack of oxygen in the uterus and prevents implantation of the embryo. This is the central mechanism by which the estrogen-containing contraceptives work. At any stage of pregnancy, a sufficient dose of estrogen kills the embryo. At the time old animals would normally have become infertile, they remain fertile if they are given a supplement of vitamin E and progesterone. Mifepristone, also known as the abortion pill, actually works by blocking the effects of progesterone, which means it effectively enhances the effect of estrogens. Of course, now mifepristone is making national headlines for its highly questionable safety, which seems to be in line with progesterone deficiency. It's likely that we are now seeing history repeat itself, as childbirth is becoming medicalized and women are being experimented on with estrogenic pharmaceuticals for greater agendas. In 1943, chemist Russell Marker discovered a more cost-efficient method to obtain progesterone for the treatment of gynecological disorders, extracting it from wild Mexican yams. However, progesterone's poor oral absorption posed a challenge, requiring relatively large doses. Two companies, Syntex SA, later acquired by Roche, and GD Searle, now a Pfizer subsidiary, sought to create improved versions of progesterone. In 1951, Syntex successfully developed norethindrone, the first synthetic progestin, or progesterone analog. Norethindrone, to this day, remains the most commonly used molecule in all of birth control. Searle then synthesized its own progestin, norethindrone, in 1952. Both compounds were derivatives of testosterone, the primary androgenic hormone. Syntex and Searle were now in competition to bring synthetic progestins to the market. Additionally, Syntex and Upjohn Pharmaceutical discovered medroxyprogesterone acetate, still widely used today in menopausal hormone replacement therapy and as birth control in the injectable Depo-Provera. All of these progestins were patented and received FDA approval for certain gynecological disorders, ironically those caused by excess estrogen to begin with. Medicine has always taken the approach that synthetic progestins are like progesterone until proven otherwise. However, as we will continue to see, history has shown us that they should be assumed not to act like progesterone until proven otherwise. The term progestin is only relevant in pharmacology as a synthetic substance that can bind and activate the progesterone receptors in cells. Due to the prevailing dogma of receptors in biology, this overlap in function has led many to believe they are the same as endogenous progesterone. Even researchers and large academic institutions have been using the terms progestin and progesterone interchangeably for decades, adding to the confusion. This is a critical distinction to make since these compounds tend to lower or even completely shut down endogenous progesterone production, leaving estrogen unopposed. During its development and study in the late 50s and early 60s, medroxyprogesterone acetate was assumed to not have any estrogenic effect, but has since been found to potentiate the proliferative effects of estrogen even without activating the estrogen receptor. The FDA refused to approve it for contraceptive use for decades, but the persistence of supposed experts eventually won out. Nowadays, there are dozens of different progestins on the market, all with vastly different actions on the various receptors than progesterone itself. Norethindrone and norethindrone have significant androgenic properties, unsurprising given their relation to testosterone. However, medroxyprogesterone acetate has also shown androgenic activity, despite being derived from progesterone. Medroxyprogesterone acetate and some of its metabolites also have significant glucocorticoid affinity, the family of hormones including cortisol, which are closely associated with stress. Many of these compounds, including norethindrone and norethindrone, even bind to and activate the estrogen receptor. If that wasn't enough, many of them, again including norethindrone, are actually endogenously converted into estrogens. True progesterone is one of our primary health-promoting hormones and has a multitude of unique effects that users of the synthetics will not experience. Estrogens normally enhance the glucocorticoid response to stress, which had been observed nearly a century ago. Progesterone tends to circumvent this, acting as one of our primary endogenous anti-stress hormones. Progesterone also antagonizes and estrogen promotes the mineralocorticoids, a set of stress hormones that respond to changes in mineral balance and are critical players in the development of high blood pressure. We've talked more about that here, but this is one of the reasons why progesterone has demonstrated anti-hypertensive effects, while the synthetic progestins increase blood pressure. These stress systems play a crucial role in insulin resistance, a topic we've extensively discussed as a root cause of various diseases. This is also why birth control is associated with glucose metabolism issues and weight gain. Many of the benefits exclusive to progesterone are due to its effects on the brain, which controls many of these downstream processes. In the brain, progesterone, but not the synthetic progestins, can be converted into another steroid called allopregnenolone. Allopregnenolone is known for its stress-reducing properties through the GABA system and by increasing dopamine, producing relaxation and a clearer state of mind. Going along with this, estrogens are capable of promoting serotonin at every level, and serotonin has an antagonistic relationship with dopamine. This produces symptoms of anhedonia, general numbness, and helplessness, and makes people want to give up. Serotonin is actually named as such because it regulates the tone of the serum and was first identified as an inflammatory mediator and vasoconstrictor, playing an important factor in blood clotting. One of its original names was enteramine, relating to its inflammatory activity in the GI tract. Uncoincidentally, synthetic progestins, regardless of which specific type, have been shown to contribute to all of these processes. It should then come as no surprise that the side effects of moodiness, nausea, and headaches are present in around 1/3 of birth control users.
Ow! Headaches! You give me headaches!
Unfortunately, I think these mechanisms can explain the consistent links to poor mental health outcomes with hormonal birth control. One shocking analysis following nearly 500,000 women prior to the use of hormonal contraceptives found that those who used them were at triple the risk of attempting suicide as those who didn't. Meanwhile, pharma has quietly been pushing patented versions of allopregnenolone to treat postpartum depression, which is associated with the same progesterone deficit. By increasing overall estrogenicity, other highly metabolic organs tend to suffer as well. Liver issues associated with birth control are jaw-dropping, with some analyses suggesting a 50-fold risk increase of liver tumors and a near 6-fold increased risk of liver cancers. At the simplest level, the synthetic progestins are not supportive of gestation, which is the core function of progesterone. Just this year, a synthetic progestin that had been assumed to prevent preterm births for nearly half a century got withdrawn from the market because it was found to not.
The FDA wants to withdraw a drug that claims to reduce the risk of preterm birth.
The agency says it doesn't work, but the pharmaceutical company behind it making arguments about racial equity.
The FDA is saying the medication doesn't actually work, but Covis Pharma says otherwise. They say there is evidence to suggest McKenna works for black women especially, who have historically been at higher risk of maternal complication, but that's all based on a loose study from 2003.
Unsurprisingly, synthetic progestins have also been related to poorer outcomes for both pregnant mothers and children. further corroborating the fact that they are not like progesterone. One such case is that of autism, where low progesterone has been an associated risk factor, and animal studies show autistic-like behaviors when mothers are given synthetic progestins, but not progesterone. Pretty much the only thing that these compounds do have in common is that they activate the progesterone receptor at relatively similar intensities. Interestingly, pharmaceutical companies are not allowed to patent bioidentical hormones like progesterone, so to receive exclusivity on a product, they have to synthesize their own analogs to the original hormones. The good news is we aren't Big Pharma, and we actually do care about your health. That's why we're happy to partner with Health Natura, a company who provides an extremely high-quality, pure, bioidentical progesterone supplement. We'll post the link in the description and the pinned comments, so be sure to check this out if you want to experience some of the unique benefits of progesterone for yourself and start recovering from birth control. During the post-World War II era, the United States witnessed a remarkable economic upswing, leading to a surge in family formations and an unprecedented growth in various industries. This remarkable time, famously known as the baby boom era, saw a rise in marriages and a decline in the average age of marriage. Families were regarded as the foundation of communities, guided by prevailing Christian values that emphasized the importance of procreation and replenishing the earth. Christianity held a deep influence on American society, promoting the idea of larger families, while legal restrictions on contraception and abortion further reinforced these norms. However, it is important to acknowledge that not everyone found contentment within the existing societal structure. Feminist activists such as Betty Friedan emerged with a rallying cry for women to enter the workforce, offering a solution to what they saw as the problem that has no name, a perceived sense of discontent and unfulfillment experienced by many women within the confines of traditional household roles. Interestingly, this call for change aligned with the interests of big business, who sought to expand their consumer base by encouraging women to work and earn disposable income. Marketing campaigns fueled a desire for the latest conveniences, including automobiles, fashion, household appliances, and, of course, pharmaceuticals. Concurrently, the wealthy elite benefited from an influx of inexpensive laborers who filled their factories and offices. The estrogenic menopausal hormone replacement therapy played a huge role in capitalizing on and fueling the surge in women entering the workforce. However, this proved to be a challenge, particularly for women with children. Feminists advocated for greater liberation in career choices and expanded contraceptive options. Simone de Beauvoir, a prominent feminist of the time, controversially stated, "No woman should be authorized to stay at home and raise her children. Society should be totally different. Women should not have that choice, precisely because if there is such a choice, too many women will make that one." The number of working mothers quadrupled between 1940 and 1960, while the motivations of big business benefiting from increased labor and consumption, as well as feminists championing women's rights, may seem evident. There were other forces at play behind the scene. Let's travel back in time to discuss the origins of certain nefarious ideologies. The notion of controlling the population and disposing of those deemed unworthy is nothing new. The concept of population control and eugenics has a dark history intertwined with various influential figures and ideologies. It draws inspiration from Darwin's ideas of survival of the fittest and the evolution towards a utopian society of perfect individuals. This notion, found in Plato's Republic as well, suggests that certain individuals deemed unworthy or lacking pure genetic material should be disposed of, accelerating the evolution of a superior race. Thomas Malthus is responsible for creating many of the modern-day narratives around population, arguing that society should adopt policies to prevent population growth from surpassing the available food supply, targeting the poor specifically. He believed that the poor should not be supported and proposed regulations to deny them assistance. He even suggested that any children beyond what is necessary to maintain population levels should perish. This idea of selectively eliminating those who contribute the least to society echoes the concept of survival of the fittest and justifies the means of eliminating the weak and impoverished. Eugenics, the selective breeding of humans to create a superior race, found its roots in the Enlightenment era and gained popularity through Charles Darwin's cousin, Sir Francis Galton. Galton embraced Plato's ideas and promoted the breeding of more suitable races or strains of blood. Inbreeding among the ruling class was common, aiming to protect their genetic purity. Galton popularized eugenics as a legitimate science, despite the fact that inbreeding ultimately leads to genetic degradation rather than evolution. Disturbingly, Darwin himself was married to his cousin, reflecting this mindset, and many of his children paid the price by early death or intellectual disabilities. The eugenics movement persisted and gained political momentum, inspiring the Eugenics Education Society in the early 20th century. This movement aimed to create a genetically curated, pure elite ruling over a utopian future. These meetings of the wealthy elite raised concerns about their potential to determine who lives and who dies, as they discussed population control and philanthropic causes. While disguised in polite and civil terms, the underlying reality is that certain individuals will be deemed unworthy of life. The Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundations were founded by two of the era's most influential figures, Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller, whose fortunes reached staggering amounts of $309 and $340 billion respectively in today's currency. Their immense wealth granted them unprecedented control and influence over society as prominent figures and renowned robber barons. The Carnegie Foundation had already established a eugenics research center, and the Rockefellers weren't far behind, using their foundation to expand eugenics efforts internationally. John D. Rockefeller Jr., who had been leading the Rockefeller Foundation since 1897, held a strong interest in eugenics and population control. Rockefeller became involved with the American Eugenics Society and served as a trustee of the Bureau of Social Hygiene. The research on population control and eugenics set the stage for these ideas to be integrated into American law. Focusing on reproductive health was a primary objective, as court rulings allowed for forced sterilization of the unfit. The progression was happening so rapidly that Adolf Hitler himself was envious of it. The Rockefeller Foundation ended up being the biggest financial contributor of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Anthropology, Human Hereditary, and Eugenics in Berlin throughout the 20s and 30s. Margaret Sanger, a prominent feminist and the founder of Planned Parenthood, began advocating for birth control in 1916 when she established an illegal clinic in Brooklyn. Despite the removal of contraceptive devices and information from the list of obscene materials in 1936, Sanger aimed for a more accessible and convenient birth control method. She envisioned a birth control pill that would simplify the practice and began lobbying the government for its legalization through a doctor's prescription, seizing the perfect opportunity. While Sanger could not garner much support in the 1940s, advocating for women's rights as a means for promoting birth control, she would get exactly what she needed by aligning with these more popular and lucrative ideologies. She requested contraceptive research funding from the Rockefeller Foundation, who would fulfill Sanger's request. The Rockefeller family, spearheaded by John D. Rockefeller Jr., enthusiastically embraced Margaret Sanger's controversial work on birth control under the guise of improving maternal and public health. In 1942, when Sanger's Birth Control Federation of America merged with the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund conveniently extended its support to the organization. John D. Rockefeller took a keen interest in this cause. Through generous donations from the fund, Planned Parenthood was able to thrive. By 1952, John D. Rockefeller III, through the Rockefeller Foundation, arranged a conference to create a nonprofit organization called the Population Council, which aimed to curb population growth through fertility control. In November 1952, Rockefeller donated $100,000 to finance the Population Council, which had a group of well-known elite scientists from various fields. Through the 1950s, the Population Council worked behind the scenes to get donations from philanthropists and provide funds to researchers to develop new technology for fertility control. The organization also received funds from other elite philanthropists, such as the Fords and Andrew Mellon, who also funded the World Health Organization with similar goals of reducing population. All of these entities have and continue to support reducing population, under the guise that doing so will improve public health. Planned Parenthood, supported by population control advocates, sought to merge the ideas of family planning, eugenics, feminism, and population control seamlessly. These covert actions aimed to manipulate the prevailing societal norms, transitioning from an era that celebrated robust families with numerous children to one that deliberately hindered population growth. What could be a better way to do this than an introduction of easily accessible birth control methods?
From my view, I believe that there should be no more babies.
As previously mentioned, the pharmaceutical company G.D. Searle was already producing synthetic hormones for gynecological issues. The company sought new applications for steroids like Progestins, hoping to discover the next breakthrough drug. However, marketing them as a birth control product was a daunting risk due to anti-birth control laws and potential religious backlash. Searle faced the possibility of losing business. Searle executives also doubted the demand for an oral contraceptive, believing women wouldn't want to take daily pills solely for contraception. The prevailing notion was that healthy women wouldn't willingly use a drug with no disease treatment or prevention benefits. That is, unless they could be convinced they did have a disease. Introducing a new character into this never-ending narrative, Gregory Pincus. Pincus excelled in biology at Cornell University and secured an assistant professor position at Harvard. His pioneering work in mammalian sexual physiology gained attention when he achieved in vitro fertilization of rabbits at the young age of 31 in 1934. By this logic, Pincus was born in 1903. This can be seen when performed with a method of mathematics called subtraction.
And I thought my jokes were bad.
However, his accomplishment was met with public backlash due to the release of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which depicted fatherless test tube babies. Pincus was vilified as a Dr. Frankenstein in the media and faced major setbacks to his career. In 1944, he helped establish the Worcester Foundation for Experimental Biology, specializing in applied research and struggling financially. Pincus even took on the role of janitor to cut costs. Now enter feminist Catherine Dexter McCormick. In her early years, she was on the front lines of the women's suffrage movement. She married Stanley McCormick, heir to the International Harvester Company fortune. Shortly after their union, Stanley mysteriously succumbed to severe schizophrenia and was put in a sanitarium, leaving his immense wealth entrusted to his wife. Having formed an acquaintance with contraceptive advocate Margaret Sanger as early as 1970, Catherine Dexter McCormick reconnected with her in 1959, seeking ways to contribute to the cause. They both saw birth control, now rebranded under the elegant term of reproductive rights, to be just as important as the right to vote. Sanger had also been in contact with Pincus and recognized the tremendous potential in their collaboration. In the summer of 1953, Sanger and McCormick paid a visit to Pincus to capitalize on his expertise and discuss the possibility of a birth control pill. To push her so-called feminist agenda, McCormick committed an initial sum of $10,000 to Pincus and the cause, followed by an astonishing increase to $150,000 to $180,000 per year until her passing in 1967. Pincus was also receiving financial contributions from groups we discussed earlier, Planned Parenthood and the Population Council. Pincus approached who else but G.D. Searle about his birth control research for Sanger and McCormick. Little did he know how fortuitous the timing would be. He wouldn't have to develop the drug from scratch. His task would be to test it. Searle chose not to directly fund the expensive project. Taking a risk, they, along with the aforementioned Syntex, provided Pincus with samples of various synthetic progestins as well as progesterone for his research. Financially supported by funding from wealthy advocates of depopulation and feminism, and utilizing the synthetic hormones provided by Searle, Pincus began testing the samples on animals. His research confirmed what was well known in the field at the time, that progesterone itself was an effective way to inhibit ovulation, which would in turn prevent pregnancy. Despite this, Pincus never followed up with further study or interest in the bioidentical progesterone. Instead, he voiced his support for the pharmaceutical company's synthetics as the most promising options going forward. This has since been speculated to be due to pharma's increased capacity to produce larger quantities of the synthetic progestins at the time. In reality, the possibility of Pincus focusing on the synthetics to create a profitable product eligible to be patented, unlike bioidentical progesterone, to appease his funding sources seems almost certain. Following promising results in his animal studies, Pincus set his sights on conducting human experiments, which required a clinician to be on board. To bridge this critical gap, he enlisted the expertise of John Rock, an esteemed OBGYN affiliated with Harvard Medical School. Rock's devout Catholicism offered a unique advantage as he could potentially sway the church with arguments supporting hormonal contraception. Although initially skeptical due to his faith, Sanger soon recognized Rock's value, remarking, "Being a good Roman Catholic and as handsome as a god, he could get away with anything." It didn't hurt that Rock was also highly respected as a doc from Harvard. Adding to the list of coincidences, Rock had just so happened to have recently converted to a population control advocate, championing the cause of smaller family sizes in response to the perceived threat of overpopulation. After testing Searle's norethindrone and Syntex's norethindrone on 50 women, it appeared that these progestins were successful at preventing pregnancy, at much lower doses than bioidentical progesterone. This was attributed to the low oral bioavailability of progesterone. During that era, ethical considerations in scientific research were not given the prominence they deserved, and studies involving human subjects were subject to far less regulation. Exploiting this leniency, the researchers seized opportunities that arose. For instance, a study involving progestins was conducted on 23 female medical students at the University of Puerto Rico. Disturbingly, the researchers utilized the students' academic performance as leverage, threatening to penalize them if they compromised data collection. Another questionable study, led by Pincus, focused on individuals confined to a psychiatric ward, comprising 12 women and 16 men. Pincus and Rock were determined to expedite the testing and approval process for their drugs, by whatever means necessary. The subsequent stage of pill development involved conducting trials on a large-scale population, but with less controlled conditions. Prior to this, Pincus and Rock faced crucial decisions regarding the choice of progestin. Allegedly, they opted for Searle's norethindrone over Syntex's norethindrone, supposedly due to the latter showing masculinization tendencies in some animal data. However, it is likely that Pincus's long-standing association with Searle played a more significant role in the decision, considering both molecules were derived from testosterone and had androgenic effects. Searle's norethindrone was accidentally contaminated with some leftover estrogen in the form of mestranol, which happened to reduce breakthrough bleeding in treatment cycles. This led to the purposeful inclusion of mestranol in the progestin tablet, the formulation that would soon become known as Enovid, despite their clear prior knowledge of the harms of exogenous estrogens. Both compounds were synthesized from and metabolized endogenously into ethinyl estradiol, one of the earliest synthetic estrogens, which is still the most widely used estrogen in birth control today. In fact, mestranol is considered a prodrug of ethinyl estradiol. That is, it's considered inactive until it gets converted into ethinyl estradiol. The potential carcinogenic nature of estrogen was not addressed by Pincus, nor was the ability of estrogen to cause abortion, at least publicly. Motivated by concerns of overpopulation and the need to evaluate the pill's efficacy and practicality, the researchers decided to conduct further studies in collaboration with the reputable University of Puerto Rico School of Medicine. In 1956, the first substantial trial commenced with 100 volunteers. However, the study faced criticism from the media, accusing the state government of serving the interests of private companies and promoting a population control agenda. By late 1958, a total of 830 women in Puerto Rico and Haiti had undergone 1 to 37 consecutive cycles of the pill. Enovid demonstrated an almost 100% effectiveness in preventing conception, with the few pregnancies attributed to inconsistent pill usage by some women. Reported side effects were numerous and included dizziness, headaches, and gastrointestinal discomfort. The initial report concluded that Enovid causes too many side reactions to be accepted generally. The director of the study later retracted those claims in a retrospective written 24 years later, saying, "We could not have been more wrong." Following the trials, by 1959, Pincus and Rock were confident that Enovid had undergone enough testing and was ready to be introduced to the market. Although Enovid had already received FDA approval in 1957 for treating gynecological disorders, the approval was limited to durations of less than a year. To be recognized as a contraceptive, the FDA required its safety to be demonstrated over a period of 25 years or more. However, conducting such long-term tests before its market release was out of the question with their incentives. In 1960, the FDA granted approval for Enovid, using a loophole to bypass the long-term safety testing by approving the drug for 2-year intervals. As the drug met the new required safety standards, it was authorized for use by healthy women. In the span of 5 years since receiving FDA approval as a contraceptive, Enovid witnessed a historic adoption rate. Approximately 95% of OBGYNs prescribed it, reaching around 6.5 million married women. Although specific figures for unmarried women were not officially reported, estimates suggest their numbers reached into the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. This swift growth can be attributed to various factors. The simplicity of prescribing Enovid appealed to physicians, who appreciated its status as a prescription-only product, conferring authority upon them. Financial incentives also played a role, as women on the pill were required to return for regular checkups every 6 months. Moreover, Planned Parenthood's endorsement contributed to a reduction in the pill's cost, broadening access to a wider population. The media further fueled its popularity by extensively promoting Enovid in newspapers and magazines during that era. Similarly to the marketing shift to frame menopause as a disease, and in line with the movement to get women in the workforce, now synthetic hormones were being pushed as a way to alleviate previously normal aspects of female life. Enovid was now being marketed as a way to postpone pesky menstruation, medicalizing yet another previously normal aspect of a woman's life. G.D. Searle employed various marketing tactics to promote Enovid, including promotional literature, sales representatives, and journal advertisements. These strategies effectively raised awareness among physicians about the advent of oral contraceptives. Searle instructed its 15,000 sales representatives to avoid discussing sensitive topics such as religion, as well as the potential harms like cancer and nausea, instead focusing on how doctors could actively participate in family planning. The provision of drug samples, free meals, and luxurious gifts by Searle representatives fostered a positive relationship with physicians. Initially, Enovid advertising emphasized its exceptional safety profile, but after reports linking it to thrombosis, a blood clotting disorder, emerged, Searle ceased mentioning safety in their advertisements altogether. In 1963, Ortho Pharmaceutical launched Ortho Novum, an innovative combination pill with dosage reminder packaging. The competition intensified in 1964 with Parke-Davis and Syntex introducing their own birth control pills. These companies invested heavily in advertising to doctors, enticing them with the potential to attract more patients by offering the pill. The ads often overshadowed the fine print on the side effects, contraindications, and limited long-term data. A significant development occurred with G.D. Searle & Company striking a special deal with Planned Parenthood, enabling discounted purchases of the pill. By the end of 1961, a remarkable 88% of Planned Parenthood clinics were providing the pill to patients. The percentage of Planned Parenthood patients using birth control escalated from 14% in 1961 to a staggering 70% by 1966. Media coverage generally portrayed the pill positively, urging readers to trust the science and presenting Pincus and Rock as celebrated figures. Killing two birds with one stone, prominent gynecologist Robert Wilson started his own foundation in order to promote the use of estrogens for menopausal HRT. Searle was one of the many synthetic hormone manufacturers who donated. Wilson released a bombshell book called Feminine Forever in 1966. Wilson was not reserved in his depiction of estrogens, the cure for women who had become a burden in their households, making them more pleasant to live with and calling the tragedy of menopause a state of decay. Somehow in line with the feminist movement, this book would permeate the culture for decades to come, being featured in influential magazines like Vogue. Though not explicitly an advertisement for the use of contraceptives, the investment from Searle seemed to have paid off, normalizing and glamorizing the use of synthetic hormones for the benefit of women. Birth control's mechanism of action was said to be through inhibiting ovulation, likely to avoid religious backlash, despite estrogen's abortifacient properties and progesterone's protective effects. However, years before, it was confirmed in humans that DES, the first approved estrogen, increased the risk of abortion, neonatal deaths, and premature births. Historically, ovulation was recognized by visual methods like laparoscopy, which would confirm follicular rupture and egg release from the ovary. However, the criteria of what constitutes ovulation shifted, now relying on proxy markers like hormone levels and metabolites in blood. This confuses what actually happens when ingesting the pill. When analyzing birth control's effects on actual egg release, alongside their ability to prevent pregnancy, a large proportion of cases show that ovulation does occur, meaning eggs are released. The most common occurrence in these cases is characterized by adequate estrogen production, but inadequate progesterone secretion in the luteal phase following ovulation. Remember that progesterone's critical role is to prepare the embryo and uterus for pregnancy, and estrogen opposes its actions. All of this indicates that they are oftentimes not ovulation inhibitors, but instead acting in line with estrogenic excess, inducing abortions. Just like synthetic pesticides, heavy metals, plastics, and plants have used on sheep, now we are the sheep, and our population and fertility are being controlled through a ubiquitously toxic mechanism. Following the widespread adoption of the pill, a phenomenon known as the sexual revolution emerged, characterized by the promotion of promiscuity. Historians argue that the sexual revolution was intricately tied to the invention of the pill, as it provided a more convenient method for engaging in casual encounters compared to previous contraceptive options like the diaphragm. In the 1950s and earlier, societal norms dictated that sexual pleasure was deemed acceptable only within the confines of marriage. However, a significant shift occurred in the 1960s when hookup culture gained traction. This cultural transformation originated primarily within college campuses and hippie communities, and its influence was further amplified through marketing efforts in various forms of media, including movies, magazines, and books. Although not all Americans actively participated, they were constantly exposed to explicit sexual messaging through their entertainment outlets. Consequently, the pill became a symbol and representation of this movement. The consequences of the sexual revolution extend far beyond issues like contraception and abortion, which have often dominated the culture war discourse. Women's rapid entrance into the workforce led to a decline in labor wages, necessitating dual income families. Delayed marriages and smaller family sizes emerged as women pursued higher education and career aspirations. These societal shifts have left an increasing number of men ineligible for marriage. Consequently, this results in casual relationships without commitments, perpetuating hookup culture and undermining the institution of marriage and the traditional family structure. In the annals of time, the transmission of values and moral guidance to children resided within the embrace of parents and families. Yet, like eager sponges, young minds absorb the world around them, seeking to grasp their own set of values. However, as the bonds of family weaken, downstream of the sexual revolution, from the advent of birth control, a new narrative emerges. Children becoming vessels of indoctrination, shaped by a state influenced by the ruling elite.
I just had lots of friends saying to me, I went off the pill and I felt so much better. And it had never occurred to me that it could be affecting my mental health, but I did,
They reported things like feeling more clear and more alive?
Yeah, feeling more vibrant, feeling more like a better sense of self, like feeling more alive. And I, wanted to see for myself, and I did.
Did you have a similar experience?
I found that for me, I did have a decrease in anxiety that was quite noticeable.
Combined oral contraceptives and the effect that has, I've seen pretty significant detriment to total and free testosterone levels in women who are on them using synthetic progestins in concurrence with ethinyl estradiol as a hyper aggressive estrogen receptor agonist to basically, castrate them, essentially, is what it's doing. That effect on their psychology and whatnot, and the effect it even has on their preference of partners, it seems pretty glaring in the literature.
Some of the top evolutionary science journals have proposed that females have two distinct mate preferences based on their point in the menstrual cycle. One preference orientation is for when they are fertile, to obtain maximum heritable benefit, while mate preference during infertility shifts towards non-heritable benefits. Ultimately, this seems to manifest as a preference for other males who appear to be physically more masculine and thus fertile during their fertility peak, while other traits such as emotional connection, intelligence, or caretaking may be prioritized during the infertile phase. As a survival technique, this makes a ton of sense and has probably done wonders in keeping the human lineage alive. When the natural tendencies of attraction get intervened by a pharmaceutical that may be used for years on end, well, you can see how that may be a problem for those involved. One could suppose that a clandestine consortium of influential individuals harbors intentions either to ensnare society within its own hedonistic, distorted desires, or to orchestrate its depopulation from the shadows. The initial step towards implementing government policies for explicit population control can be traced back to the Draper Report of 1959, which formed part of the broader CIA reform of US foreign policy. The Draper Report, commissioned by President Eisenhower's Committee on Foreign Assistance, highlighted the detrimental impact of population growth on economic progress in underdeveloped nations. As a result, it advocated for the inclusion of family planning and fertility control research. These findings have since become central to the Zero Population Growth, or ZPG, movement, which claims that a growing population only serves to cause issues like pollution, violence, and a loss of values. Ironic. William Draper, who led the Committee on Foreign Assistance, subsequently collaborated with John D. Rockefeller III and his buddy and population control advocate Hugh Moore, forming the leadership trio of the ZPG movement. Eisenhower's committee consisted of highly esteemed individuals closely associated with the Rockefeller family. This included John J. McCloy, the chairman of the board of Chase Manhattan Bank and of the Ford Foundation, which had just begun its substantial funding of research in reproductive biology. Draper, who played a significant role in post-World War II Reconstruction, now took charge of the United Nations World Population Year activities. Hugh Moore stressed the significance of population control and provided funding to the Population Reference Bureau, a nonprofit organization that collects and provides statistics for research on population, establishing it as the press service for the ZPG operation. In the 1960s, Hugh Moore initiated a campaign known as the World Population Emergency Campaign. Its objective was to secure funding for Planned Parenthood and expand global family planning infrastructure. The New York Times and other influential media outlets played a crucial role in promoting this campaign. Other ruling class elites, such as Mariner S. Eccles, a Federal Reserve banker, and chemical industry mogul Lamont DuPont Copeland, joined the cause. Eventually, the emergency campaign merged with the Planned Parenthood Federation of America to form the Planned Parenthood World Federation. William Draper became the official fundraiser for the organization and actively sought contributions for population programs. In the public's eyes, this shift marked a departure from the earlier idealistic activism of Margaret Sanger and her followers. Perception now shifted to reducing birth rates and establishing enduring institutions for the broader agenda orchestrated by the Rockefeller-led cabal. In 1961, the Hugh Moore Fund began sponsoring full-page advertisements to propagate the concept of a population bomb and to pressure the government into taking action on population control. Their influence extended to key figures within the executive and legislative branches. Secretary of State Dean Rusk advocated for birth control and aligned with Draper and Rockefeller's agenda. In years prior, President Eisenhower showed no interest in promoting birth control. However, with President John F. Kennedy in office, Rockefeller and Cass Cansfield, the chairman of the Planned Parenthood World Federation, collaborated on a population statement submitted to the president. In 1952, a significant speech reversing American policy and endorsing family planning was delivered at the United Nations. The CIA press actively promoted this shift. Then Senator Ernest Gruening introduced a bill calling for increased research and the establishment of a President's Commission on Population in 1963. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson emphasized the importance of addressing population growth through family planning in his State of the Union address. He formed a committee on population as part of the President's National Citizens Commission. Who did he enlist? Influential figures like Eugene Black, the president of the United Nations World Bank Group, along with the aforementioned Cass Cansfield, William Draper, and John D. Rockefeller III. Meanwhile, the State Department's Agency for International Development granted $2.1 million to support manpower training programs. Sensing an opportunity, Hugh Moore established the Population Crisis Committee as a platform for publicity, lobbying, and organization, with William Draper eventually assuming leadership. Draper utilized his connections with Rockefeller and CIA associates in the government to make the committee a prominent voice in Washington. In March 1966, President Johnson reaffirmed the government's commitment to birth control and requested increased funds for research and services. Influenced by Draper, Senator Fulbright's Title X amendment granted congressional approval to the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. The Agency for International Development established the War on Hunger and established a population service to coordinate decisions regarding population control aid. Contraceptives became eligible for financing, and assistance was announced in September 1967. The agency's financial support for population programs grew rapidly, reaching $100 million within 4 years. Rockefeller, Moore, and Draper spearheaded an ecology movement which sponsored demagogic advertisements that circulated 40 million copies, specifically targeting influential individuals of industry and government. Presidents Johnson and Nixon continued to further promote ZPG through committees and addresses. President Nixon drew upon the findings of the committee in a presidential address delivered on July 18, 1969. This address was dedicated exclusively to the topic of population growth.
And our cities are going to be choked with people. They're going to be choked with traffic. They're going to be choked with crime. They're going to be choked with pollution. And they will be impossible places in which to live, and the explosions will be even worse.
Nixon's recommendation to establish a commission on population growth received congressional approval the following year. John D. Rockefeller was appointed as chairman. The commission's report, published in 1972, marked a significant milestone in Rockefeller's effort, as the ZPG had become a national objective and had 30,000 members. The United Nations Population Fund, a global sexual and reproductive health agency established 5 years prior, organized and formulated the World Population Plan of Action in 1974. This plan expressed support for new contraceptives and outlined their goals to influence and moderate fertility. Around this time, the World Health Organization added the pill to its list of essential medicines, declaring it met the priority healthcare needs of the population. Here's the bottom line. There was an obscene amount of remarkably powerful and influential population control advocates and organizations conspiring to control our fertility by any means necessary.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. Boundaries shift, new players step in, but power always finds a place to rest its head.
Interestingly, another group of women was acting in direct contrast to the goals of Margaret Sanger and Catherine Dexter McCormick. A book titled The Doctor's Case Against the Pill, written by Barbara Seaman, detailed various documented health risks of the pills like heart attacks and blood clots. This caught the attention of Senator Gaylord Nelson. Yes, those are really their names. Their campaign against the pill due to safety concerns reached a climax in a 1970 Senate hearing, which garnered national attention. Senator Nelson was surprisingly aligned with many of the global agendas at the time, vocalizing his concerns with population growth and how it must be contained. He's also famous for being the creator of Earth Day, which now only exists to further this ideology. The hearings did spread awareness. The battle was won, but the war had just begun. A warning label of increased blood clot risk was added. Mestranol was replaced with ethinyl estradiol at a lower dose due to these concerns. But remember, mestranol mostly converts into ethinyl estradiol in the body anyway, and is considerably more potent than even our endogenous estradiol. This is a technique the industry still likes to use today. They tell us that they lowered the dose, which is true, but that's because they use compounds that are far more estrogenic and can accomplish the same thing at lower doses. Many of the estrogens associated with birth control, hormone replacement therapy, and environmental pollutants have even stronger effects than our own endogenous estrogens, on top of the fact that they accumulate in the body over time. In 1968, the World Health Organization met in Geneva to discuss development in fertility control, listing various agents that had the potential to be deployed on a global scale to reduce population growth. Among them, of course, estrogens, and another key player, copper. Various heavy metals to reduce fertility were discussed, and copper's mechanism of preventing pregnancy was by being estrogenic. That is, when applied to the uterus, it induced proliferation and inflammation of the uterine lining and prevented implantation of early embryos. This, of course, led to the development of the copper IUDs, which to this day is one of the most popular and effective birth control methods, though I hesitate again to call it a contraceptive. It seemed consensus at this point that any agent employed to reduce fertility was invariably toxic, although this didn't matter as slowing population growth by any means necessary was for the greater good. Meanwhile, researchers at the Population Council took inspiration from the WHO to realize the potential of the anti-fertility effects of copper. Searle caught wind and became the first commercial producer of the copper IUD, a way to get the metal directly to the area of interest. The method was remarkably effective at preventing pregnancy and proved that IUDs had massive potential as a means of delivering birth control agents. Originally, the system was poised to use bioidentical progesterone, which showed comparable efficacy to the copper product. However, it was a commercial failure due to the necessity of replacing it every year. Syntex had already utilized norethindrone as a foundation to create a more powerful synthetic progestin known as levonorgestrel. By substituting bioidentical progesterone with levonorgestrel, the IUD's lifespan extended to 5 years, eliminating the need for yearly replacements. As a result, the copper and levonorgestrel IUDs emerged as prominent choices, while bioidentical progesterone again faded into obscurity. Levonorgestrel is better now known as Plan B, or the morning after pill. The concept of an emergency contraceptive is a bit misleading since most of the drugs sold as such are the exact same drugs used as indefinite contraceptives, just at much higher doses. Even the copper IUD and mifepristone are used for this purpose, continuing to blur the line between contraception, abortion, and fertility destruction. By 1976, the link between menopausal HRT causing endometrial cancer and blood clotting disorders had become indisputable, and the FDA responded with more warning labels on these products, and HRT sales slowed down. In response to this, pharma had the genius idea of not stopping the operation, but doubling down on it, adding in the synthetic progestins to the HRT protocol. This was supposedly to counteract some of the side effects of estrogen, but they weren't about to allow estrogen's name to be stained. Heart disease was the leading cause of death in the US, and the government increased its focus on research. The industry recognized the perfect opportunity to safeguard estrogen's esteemed status. The synthetic hormones emerged as a promising contender for heart disease studies, prompting them to employ every available tactic to ensure estrogen's resurgence. One study known as the Coronary Drug Project quietly terminated 2 study arms. The reason? Increased cases of cancers and heart diseases, resulting in higher mortality rates. The participants in these terminated groups had been receiving Premarin, a weak estrogen still widely used for HRT to this day. Evidence had emerged linking oral contraceptives like Enovid to high blood pressure as early as 1967, while bioidentical progesterone showed a protective effect. It should have been a clear-cut case, but the Coronary Drug Project enrolled male participants, giving drug companies an opportunity to manipulate the narrative. Estrogen was the female hormone, remember? While the study indicated an increase in heart disease and mortality with Premarin, estrogen did have what were perceived as positive effects on cholesterol, a crucial topic at the time. The prevailing dogma was shifting towards the belief that not all cholesterol was bad, only the LDL cholesterol was, while the HDL cholesterol was good. At the time, interventions such as vegetable oils and statins were both being promoted to lower LDL cholesterol and raise HDL. However, HDL is known to be increased by things like drinking alcohol and being exposed to other environmental toxins. It's good in the sense that it aids in the detoxification process, but its elevation is not a good sign, and that appeared to be the case for its increase with progestin and estrogen. As controlled human trials with women required considerable time to yield conclusive results, studies producing more manipulable data were churned out in the interim. This was on full display in the 1985 edition of the New England Journal of Medicine. The media was quick to jump on an article on the Nurses' Health Study, which claimed a dramatic risk reduction in heart disease for women who used HRT. The study later showed that the decrease in heart disease risk was accompanied by an increase in the risk of ischemic stroke. This indicates that the same pathology in the blood vessels was happening, just that the arteries to the brain accumulated plaque instead of to the heart. The study also showed an increased risk of cancers. Meanwhile, in the same journal, the Framingham study showed an increase in the risk of heart disease for estrogen users. This brings up a key point, which is why estrogens and synthetic progestins may show what is referred to as benefit in certain conditions. Estrogen could cause plenty of other health issues, reallocating the morbidity and mortality away from heart disease towards other issues that would not get talked about as much. Dr. Pete summed it up well when he said, "If enough women die from strokes, pulmonary embolisms, accidents, suicide, cancer, and loss of immunity caused by estrogen excess, it is possible that some competent study will eventually show that estrogen treatment reduces the mortality from heart attacks." Another reason for this may be that if a woman is struggling from a health issue arising from hormonal abnormalities, then shutting down these hormones may seem beneficial. It's beneficial in the same way that cutting your head off would be beneficial for headaches, or that staying home your entire life is beneficial for social anxiety. In the end, you're not addressing the actual problem and probably just making things worse. Going back to the Nurses' Health Study, while estrogens alone showed an increased risk of developing cancer, the risk increased even more when progestin was added, and was at its highest when administered alone. Even administering the bioidentical estrogen, estradiol, increased risk. The authors still refer to the synthetic progestins as progesterone and vice versa, even though the bioidentical progesterone has never been shown to contribute to cancer. Researcher Elizabeth Barrett Connor pointed out that women with heart disease risks were specifically not prescribed estrogen during the study period, as is stated in the physician's manual at the time. Is it any surprise that there was less heart disease among estrogen users then? It seems as though few stopped to question how substances known to contribute to blood clotting, stroke, and hypertension were now being marketed as protective for the cardiovascular system. More research was done thereafter, confirming previous suspicions that the synthetic hormones had a so-called beneficial effect on cholesterol, but did not benefit cardiovascular disease, and was more likely to worsen it. It didn't matter much. By 1992, Premarin, the estrogen used for HRT, was the #1 drug prescription in the United States. At this point, estrogen had firmly been established in the eyes of the public as the protective female hormone. It was now also being touted as a heart protective hormone, an idea that still persists to this day. In reality, nothing could be further from the truth. We've discussed how hormonal birth control promotes systems related to heart disease, such as the glucocorticoid and mineralocorticoid systems, and these contribute to insulin resistance, blood clotting, and hypertension. Additionally, hormonal birth control can deplete essential nutrients like B vitamins, zinc, selenium, magnesium, and vitamin E. Vitamin E is critical for fertility and has anti-estrogenic effects, as well as anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties that are cardioprotective. In this regard, vitamin E acts very similarly to aspirin, as well as progesterone. In fact, vitamin E, or the tocopherols, comes from the Greek tokos, meaning birth, and pherin, meaning to bear or carry. Birth control users show increased lipid oxidation products and decreased levels of vitamin E. The other fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and K also have anti-estrogenic effects and protect against arterial calcification. With all of this in mind, it's not surprising that the most common estrogen used in birth control can increase the risk of heart attack by over 3-fold. Once again, Health Natura has your back. They have ultra high quality forms of all of the fat-soluble vitamins and a high purity aspirin product. You can order them through our link in the video description to counteract excess estrogen and protect your heart. Birth control's impact on iron balance is a potential concern. Iron, while essential, can be harmful in excess, leading to cell degradation and aging-related conditions. Many interventions that promote longevity and protect against disease, including aspirin, work in large part by reducing iron stores. Women absorb more iron than men from food and rely on monthly bleeding to balance iron levels. However, a significant proportion of women will experience bleeding irregularity or even a complete loss of menstruation when using birth control, contributing to a buildup of iron over time. This accumulation of iron contributes to cell death in diseases and I think may be a culprit behind inflammatory and other abnormal endometrial structural changes found in women using hormonal contraceptives. Despite limited evidence of benefit and significant concerns, birth control is still widely prescribed for menstrual cycle issues and endometriosis. The idea of the synthetic hormones being heart healthy was so prevalent that many government officials and gynecologists resisted the idea of wasting more money studying the issue. The science was settled in their eyes. However, it was eventually agreed that one final nail in the coffin was necessary, culminating in one of the largest control studies ever conducted, the Women's Health Initiative. Tens of thousands of women were enrolled, and the study went on for several years. Participants received Premarin alone or in combination with medroxyprogesterone acetate, or Provera, the synthetic progestin used in the birth control shots. Keep in mind that Premarin is the weakest estrogen used in practice, and that Provera is still widely used in contraception and HRT today. The harms from the Women's Health Initiative were so glaring that both interventions needed to stop before the study was set to conclude. Vascular diseases, cognitive decline, and cancers just to scratch the surface. Pharma and the media alike had no choice but to admit there was some issue with these drugs. The study was highly publicized, too hard to ignore such a colossal failure. Pharma, the media, and experts alike predictably layered in complexity and caveats to continue to divert attention and absolve blame. Now it's become about talking to your doctor if it's right based on your risk profile. Leading academics have been highly critical of the study for various reasons. For instance, many women opted to drop out of the HRT, meaning there were progressively less people to study over time, which made the conclusions less certain. Had no one considered that the reason women were dropping out was likely due to the fact that the drugs were riddled with horrible side effects? How many more potential cancers or heart attacks would there have been had the women not withdrawn? The concerns haven't slowed down in recent years, and unfortunately, I think the worst is yet to come. In 2000, the synthetic progestin drospirenone, a derivative of Searle's spironolactone, was introduced onto the market in combination with the ubiquitous ethinyl estradiol under the brand names Yaz and Yasmin sold by Bayer. Young women trusted their doctors and bought into the drug's flashy ad campaigns. The drug was a huge commercial success, raking in billions and becoming the most popular birth control in the world. By the end of the decade, lawsuits against the pharma juggernaut had stockpiled to the thousands. Girls were suffering various cardiovascular issues, including blood clots, heart attacks, and strokes from the birth control medication.
Are things still heating up with you and Derek?
Let's just say I'm looking for a good birth control pill. No, seriously, he won't use a condom.
Well, have you tried Yaz? The leading form of birth control pills for women. It's amazing.
I just started taking it 2 weeks ago and I've only gained like 10 pounds. I've never been so bloated.
What? Yaz has totally regulated my period, except for some off and on mid-month bleeding. And I've only had one tiny blood clot.
Plaintiffs claimed that Bayer did not do enough research on the matter before releasing the product, since subsequent analyses confirmed what these poor women had to learn the hard way. Bayer was also accused of knowingly concealing risks of their drugs, a notion supported by the former FDA commissioner, who said Bayer withheld vital information about the risks associated with Yaz during the approval process. He also said that an FDA advisory committee's vote to keep Yaz on the market was tainted by conflicts of interest. By the conclusion of the condensed litigation in 2019, close to 20,000 lawsuits had been filed, and the drug had been linked to over 100 deaths. Bayer ended up having to shell out close to $2 billion in settlements. Of course, even with this, reproductive experts still warned women to stay the course in fear of the increasing birth rate that could result. Still today, this formulation remains in use, being prescribed to nearly 1 million American women yearly. What's interesting is that drosperidone's risks are found to be comparable to other birth control meds on the market, so it's likely that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of women worldwide are experiencing these issues without recognizing the causative agent. Industry, academia, and government will always poke holes in the evidence that goes against the drugs they develop. They will continue to operate under the premise that it's not conclusively bad rather than the precautionary principle. This evidence should also apply to hormonal birth control. They are the same compounds and fundamentally act the same way. Clearly, FDA approval is not a metric of long-term sound evidence, but of expert opinion and influence from the ruthless transnational elite.
It's just unfortunate how little of an emphasis is put on this part of the education process around hormone exposure when it's like given to so many young girls and they aren't properly educated about its side effect profile. It'll be like, oh, you might get, some mood swings, you might, have some hair fall out, you might have a little bit of depression, maybe your sex drive changes a little bit, but people don't really highlight the actual, at a practical level, what happens to your blood work, what happens to your biomarkers, what happens to your hormonal signaling from a natural perspective. What are these hormones even doing that get put into you?
Unfortunately, this is the sad reality of birth control in the modern world. These pharmaceuticals have become so ingrained in modern culture and normalized that many doctors, parents, and young women don't even think twice about it, despite evidence continuing to stockpile. We live in an environment where estrogenic substances are flooding our systems from every angle, just compounding the issue. Ironically, birth control itself has become a xenoestrogen. A newer, perhaps more disturbing trend arose in which doctors are prescribing estrogen to young boys, while the mainstream media propagates a narrative that they have been assigned the wrong gender at birth. While the global influential elite families and individuals continue to exert control over major sectors such as big business, government, and media, and the like, the World Economic Forum can serve as an indicator of their agendas. Interestingly, despite the ongoing rise in population, the World Economic Forum claims that humanity has witnessed improvements in areas like infant mortality, life expectancy, quality of life, and human development. This realization challenges their previous assertions that resource conservation necessitated population control. However, they have now shifted their attention to climate change, using it as a reason to advocate for population control in order to protect those they claim will be affected by poverty. Of course, making sure to provide them with birth control is critical for them to achieve their goals and stop climate change. It becomes evident that the excuses may have changed, but the underlying agenda remains consistent: reduce and control the population by any means necessary. The idea lives on, now in the form of the World Economic Forum's activism and the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, both advocating for hormonal birth control. The NIH has classified our own primary endogenous estrogen, estradiol, as a carcinogen. The WHO and the NIH have since labeled hormonal contraceptives and menopausal hormonal replacement therapies as cancer-causing agents as well. Yet, they are as glamorized as ever by the mainstream media and remain on the WHO's list of essential medications. That should tell you all you need to know about this issue. Whatever you decide to do, I encourage everyone to be extremely critical of what you put in your body, even if that means questioning a doctor. We all have the right to really know what's going on, and we shouldn't be at the mercy of a medical system that cares about making profitable products and serving political interests, even if it comes at the expense of our health. You can wait for the studies to be done and for the establishment to tell you the truth, but how could they admit it at this point? Don't let them fool you. Subscribe to our channel.